The bone-chilling wind howled across the barren plains of Arizona as Lily Parker urged her exhausted mare through the deepening snow, her fingers numb within her thin leather gloves as the unexpected blizzard intensified with merciless fury. What had begun as a clear December afternoon in 1879 had transformed into a white nightmare, the sun disappearing behind dark clouds that unleashed winter's wrath upon the desert territory that rarely saw such severe weather. Lily's journey from Philadelphia to Casa Grande had already tested every ounce of her determination. At 22, she had left behind the only home she'd ever known, traveling west to claim the modest property her late uncle had surprisingly bequeathed to her in his will. The small ranch sitting at the edge of the growing settlement represented her chance at independence, something a woman of her station rarely achieved in the East. "Just a little further, Belle," she whispered to her horse, her words immediately stolen by the wind. The temperature had dropped so rapidly that Lily's breath formed ice crystals on the woolen scarf wrapped around her lower face. Her heavy traveling coat, sufficient for the typical winter weather of the territory, provided little protection against this unexpected storm. The landmarks she had carefully memorized from the crude map the stagecoach driver had drawn for her had disappeared beneath the white blanket of snow. Lily had become hopelessly disoriented as the once visible trail vanished, leaving her to wander in what she prayed was the right direction toward her new home. Belle stumbled, nearly sending Lily tumbling into a snowdrift. The mare was struggling, her sides heaving with exertion. Lily knew she couldn't push the animal much further in these conditions. The realization that they might not reach shelter before nightfall sent a jolt of fear through her that had nothing to do with the cold. "We need to find somewhere to wait this out," she murmured, squinting through the blinding whiteness. As if in answer to her desperate prayer, she spotted a dark outcropping of rocks in the distance, perhaps a quarter-mile ahead. It wasn't much, but it might provide some windbreak until the storm passed. Lily guided Belle toward the rocks, but the snow was deepening rapidly, reaching the horse's knees in places. The poor animal struggled forward, her strength clearly failing. When they finally reached the outcropping, Lily's heart sank. What she had hoped might be a small cave or deep recess was merely a shallow overhang, barely enough to shield them from the direct onslaught of snow. She dismounted, her legs nearly buckling as her feet sank into the deep snow. Leading Belle to the meager shelter, Lily tried to think clearly through the fog of cold that seemed to be seeping into her mind. She needed to build a fire, but the howling wind and wet snow made that prospect nearly impossible. The few branches she managed to gather from beneath the overhang were sodden and useless. As darkness began to fall, transforming the white landscape into a gray void, Lily huddled against Belle's side, drawing what warmth she could from the exhausted animal. She had traveled across the country alone, facing countless challenges along the way, only to perish within miles of her destination. The bitter irony wasn't lost on her as she felt the dangerous drowsiness of severe cold beginning to cloud her thoughts. "I won't give up," she said aloud, forcing herself to stand and stamp her feet, swinging her arms to generate some warmth. "I didn't come this far to die in a snowstorm," but her defiance seemed hollow against the overwhelming power of the blizzard. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as Lily fought to stay awake, knowing that to sleep in this cold would mean certain death. Belle nickered softly, pressing closer to her mistress, the horse's own survival instincts compelling it to share body heat. The sound came so faintly that Lily thought she might have imagined it the distant crunch of snow beneath hooves. She strained to hear over the wind, uncertain if her mind was playing tricks on her. Then it came again, closer this time, accompanied by what sounded like a man's voice calling out. "Hello," Lily shouted, her voice weak against the howling wind. "Over here." She stumbled away from the overhang, waving her arms frantically despite the pain the movement caused in her frozen limbs. Through the curtain of falling snow, a shape emerged, a rider on horseback, moving carefully toward her. "Madam, are you all right?" The deep voice carried to her despite the storm as the rider approached. Atop a powerful chestnut stallion sat a man bundled against the cold, his face partially obscured by a snow-dusted hat and woolen scarf. "No," Lily admitted, her voice trembling with cold and relief. "I'm lost. My horse is exhausted. I don't think we would have lasted the night." The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing himself to be tall and broad-shouldered. He approached Lily slowly, as if worried about frightening her. "Samuel Fletcher," he said, extending a gloved hand. "My ranch is about 2 miles from here. I was checking my southern fence line when the storm hit and spotted what looked like horse tracks heading this way." "Lily Parker," she replied, her numb fingers barely able to grasp his hand. "I'm trying to reach the Parker property. My uncle left it to me." Samuel's eyes widened slightly beneath the brim of his hat. "Old Thomas Parker's place, that's just beyond my eastern border." He glanced at the darkening sky, then at Belle. "Your mare won't make it that far tonight, not in this storm. My place is closer. We need to get you warmed up before you freeze to death." As if to emphasize his point, a violent shiver racked Lily's body. She could feel the cold had penetrated too deep, her thinking growing sluggish. Samuel seemed to recognize the signs of severe exposure immediately. "Madam, forgive my forwardness, but you're in the first stages of freezing. We need to move quickly." Without waiting for a response, he unwrapped an additional blanket from behind his saddle and draped it around her shoulders. Then he helped Lily mount his stallion before retrieving Belle's reins. "Hold tight to the saddle horn," he instructed, his voice carrying a note of urgency. "I'll walk alongside and lead us back. You'll freeze," Lily protested weakly, noticing he'd given her his extra layers. "I'm accustomed to this land," Samuel replied simply, though Lily doubted anyone could be truly accustomed to such brutal conditions. Nevertheless, he set off with determined strides, leading his stallion with Lily aboard while also guiding the exhausted Belle. The journey seemed endless to Lily, her consciousness fading in and out as the cold seeped deeper into her bones. She was vaguely aware of Samuel checking on her frequently, his voice urging her to stay awake, to hold on just a little longer. When the dark silhouette of a sturdy cabin finally emerged from the whiteness, Lily nearly wept with relief. Samuel helped her dismount, practically carrying her to the door as her legs refused to support her weight. Inside, the cabin was blessedly warm compared to the howling storm outside, though the fire in the stone hearth had burned low during his absence. "I need to see to the horses," Samuel said, helping Lily into a chair near the hearth. "Then we'll get you properly warmed." "Can you stay awake until I return?" Lily nodded, though it took enormous effort. "The horses, please make sure Belle is all right." "I'll take good care of her," he promised before disappearing back into the storm. Left alone, Lily fought against the overwhelming drowsiness. The cabin was simple but well built, clearly the home of a man who valued practicality over comfort. A single main room served as both kitchen and living area, with what appeared to be a small bedroom visible through a partially open door. Everything was neat and organized, from the cooking implements hanging near the iron stove to the rifles mounted carefully on the wall. What seemed like hours, but was likely only minutes later, the door opened again, bringing a blast of cold air and swirling snow before Samuel quickly closed it behind him. He was covered in snow, his face reddened from the biting wind. "Horses are settled in the barn with feed and blankets," he reported, immediately moving to stoke the fire. He added several logs, working efficiently until the flames leaped higher, casting much-needed warmth throughout the room. Turning to Lily, his expression grew concerned. "You're still too cold. Those wet clothes need to come off." Had she been in her normal state of mind, Lily might have been scandalized by such a suggestion from a stranger, but survival overrode propriety. Still, she hesitated, her fingers too numb to work the buttons of her coat. Samuel seemed to understand both her hesitation and her difficulty. "I have a sister in Tucson," he said conversationally, as he helped her remove her frozen outer garments. "She'd have my hide if I let a lady freeze to death out of misplaced gentlemanly concerns. I'll turn my back while you change into these." He handed her a clean flannel shirt and woolen trousers that would clearly swallow her smaller frame. They're mine, so they'll be too large, but they're dry and warm." True to his word, Samuel turned away, busying himself with preparing coffee on the iron stove while Lily struggled out of her sodden clothing. The simple task of changing proved enormously difficult with her stiff, uncooperative fingers, but eventually she managed to don the offered garments, rolling up the sleeves and pants legs to accommodate her smaller stature. "I'm decent," she said softly, her voice still quavering from the cold. Samuel turned, nodding approvingly at the sight of her in dry clothes, though his eyes remained respectfully on her face. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 28 or 30, with a weather-beaten face that spoke of years working under the harsh Arizona sun. His eyes were a striking blue against his tanned skin, and when he wasn't squinting against the snow and wind, his features were pleasantly handsome in a rugged way. "The coffee will help warm you from the inside," he said, pouring a steaming cup and adding a generous spoonful of honey. "And I think we need to get you closer to the fire." To Lily's surprise, Samuel dragged a bearskin rug from the corner of the room and spread it before the hearth. Then he gathered every blanket in the cabin and created a nest of sorts directly in front of the roaring fire. "Best place to chase the cold from your bones," he explained, gesturing for her to sit on the soft fur. When she did, he carefully wrapped several blankets around her shoulders. "My father taught me that the quickest way to warm someone with snow chill is direct heat and shared warmth." "Shared warmth?" Lily asked, her mind still moving sluggishly. Samuel cleared his throat, looking somewhat uncomfortable for the first time. "Body heat, madam. It's the most effective way to prevent freezing in these conditions, but first, drink your coffee." Lily accepted the offered cup, wrapping her hands around its blessed warmth. The hot liquid spread through her chest as she sipped, gradually bringing sensation back to her extremities, a process that was as painful as it was necessary. Outside, the storm's fury intensified, rattling the cabin's windows and howling down the chimney. Samuel moved about efficiently, securing shutters, adding more wood to the fire, and preparing a simple meal of beans, jerky, and biscuits that he'd quickly mixed and set to bake in the small oven. As warmth slowly returned to Lily's body, so did her awareness of her situation. Here she was, alone in a cabin with a man she'd just met, wearing his clothing, about to share a meal with him. It was scandalously improper by the standards of Philadelphia society, yet without this man's intervention, she would surely have perished in the snow. "Thank you," she said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. "For finding me, for saving my life." Samuel, who had been stirring the pot of beans, looked up with a slight smile that transformed his serious face. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Lily shook her head firmly. "Not anyone would have risked their own safety in such a storm, not for a stranger." He shrugged, seemingly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Out here, we look after each other. It's the only way to survive." After a pause, he added, "Though I admit, I wasn't expecting to find a lone woman out in a blizzard. What brought you to Casa Grande, Miss Parker?" Lily explained about her uncle's unexpected bequest, watching as recognition dawned in Samuel's eyes. "Thomas was your uncle. He never mentioned family back east." "We weren't close," Lily admitted. "He and my father had a falling out before I was born. I only met him once when I was a child, when he passed through Philadelphia on business. I was as surprised as anyone when his solicitor contacted me about the inheritance." Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "Thomas was a good neighbor, kept to himself mostly, but always willing to lend a hand when needed. His place has been sitting empty since he passed last spring. It's a decent little ranch, though the house needs work." "Do you know it well?" Lily asked eagerly. She had only the vaguest description of her new property from the lawyer's letters. "Well enough. As I said, we share a border. About 20 acres of decent grazing land, a small orchard, and a 2-room cabin with a good well." He hesitated before adding, "It's a lot for one person to manage, especially someone not familiar with ranching." Lily lifted her chin slightly. "I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Fletcher." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I don't doubt that, Miss Parker. Anyone who'd travel alone across the country to claim an unknown inheritance has plenty of grit, but ranching takes specific knowledge, The land out here isn't forgiving to those who don't understand it." Before Lily could respond, he was ladling beans onto 2 tin plates and adding freshly baked biscuits alongside strips of jerky softened in the bean broth. He handed her a plate and settled across from her on the bearskin rug, close enough to the fire to benefit from its warmth but maintaining a respectful distance. They ate in companionable silence for a while, the simple food tasting remarkably good to Lily after her ordeal. The warmth of the fire, the dry clothes, and the hot meal gradually restored her, though a bone-deep weariness remained. "The storm's not letting up," Samuel observed, glancing toward the windows where snow continued to accumulate on the sills despite the closed shutters. "You'll need to stay here tonight. Tomorrow, if it's clear, I'll take you to your property." Lily nodded, knowing there was no alternative. "I appreciate your hospitality, Mr. Fletcher." "Samuel, please," he said. "Or Sam, out here we don't stand much on formality." "Then you must call me Lily," she replied with a small smile. After they finished eating, Samuel took the plates to a wash basin while Lily remained by the fire, still wrapped in blankets. Despite the warmth, she found herself occasionally shivering aftereffects of the severe cold she'd endured. Samuel noticed immediately upon returning. "You're still chilled," he observed with concern. "It can take hours for the body to truly warm after that kind of exposure." He hesitated, then sat beside her on the bearskin rug. "Miss Lily," he corrected himself, "I meant what I said earlier about shared warmth. It's the most effective way to prevent the lingering effects of severe cold. I promise you I'm a gentleman, but I would be remiss in my duty if I didn't offer." Understanding dawned on Lily, bringing a flush to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire's heat. The proper response would be to politely decline such an intimate suggestion. Yet the occasional violent shivers that still racked her body reminded her that propriety counted for little against survival. "I trust you," she said simply, surprising both herself and Samuel with the certainty in her voice. With careful movements, Samuel settled himself beside her before the fire, arranging the blankets to cover them both. His arm slipped around her shoulders, drawing her against his side. The immediate comfort of his solid warmth was undeniable, and Lily found herself unconsciously leaning into him. "Better?" he asked, his voice low. Lily nodded, not trusting herself to speak as her body gradually relaxed against his. They sat in silence, watching the flames dance in the hearth while the storm raged outside. It should have been awkward, this forced intimacy with a stranger, yet somehow it felt natural, as if they'd known each other much longer than mere hours. "Tell me about Philadelphia," Samuel said eventually, his deep voice rumbling pleasantly against her side. Grateful for the conversation to distract from their unusual proximity, Lily began describing her life in the east, the crowded streets, the grand buildings, the stifling social expectations that had increasingly felt like invisible chains binding her to a life she hadn't chosen. "After my parents died of influenza 3 years ago, I stayed with my mother's sister," she explained. "Aunt Margaret meant well, but her sole ambition was to see me suitably married, preferably to someone wealthy enough to improve her own standing in society. And that wasn't what you wanted." Samuel asked. Lily sighed. "I wanted a choice. The men Aunt Margaret considered suitable viewed wives as ornaments, not partners. When I received the letter about Uncle Thomas's bequest, it felt like freedom, a chance to determine my own path." Samuel was quiet for a moment. "It takes courage to leave everything familiar behind. Or desperation," Lily said with a small laugh. "What about you? Have you always lived in Arizona territory?" He shook his head. "Born in Missouri. My father brought us west when I was 10 after my mother died." He had dreams of striking it rich in the silver mines. Instead, he discovered he had a talent for breeding horses. "We settled here when I was 16, and your father now, passed on 6 years ago, left me the ranch. My sister Catherine married a shopkeeper in Tucson, and my younger brother James is trying his luck in the Tombstone mines." There was a note of disapproval in his voice at the mention of his brother. "You don't approve of mining?" Lily asked. Samuel sighed. "I don't approve of my brother throwing his life away on get-rich-quick schemes instead of building something lasting." The mine owners get rich while the miners work themselves to death for pennies, but James was always restless, always looking for the easy path. The conversation flowed easily between them as the hours passed. Lily found herself sharing thoughts and feelings she'd rarely expressed to anyone, while Samuel revealed himself to be both thoughtful and surprisingly well-read for a frontier rancher. "My father believed education was important, even out here," he explained when she commented on his knowledge of literature. "We had a small library of books he'd brought from back east. During the winter months when ranch work slowed, he insisted we read and discuss what we'd learned." As the night deepened and the fire burned lower, Lily found her eyelids growing heavy despite her best efforts to stay awake. Her head gradually drooped until it rested against Samuel's shoulder. She felt him stiffen momentarily, then relax. "You should sleep," he said softly. "You're safe here." Those simple words, "you're safe here," struck Lily with unexpected force. How long had it been since she'd truly felt safe? Perhaps not since before her parents' deaths. The realization brought tears to her eyes that she quickly blinked away. "What about you?" she murmured, already half asleep. "I'll keep the fire going," he replied. Lily meant to insist that he needed rest too, but exhaustion claimed her before she could form the words. She drifted into sleep with the steady rhythm of Samuel's breathing beside her and the comforting crackle of the fire before them. When Lily awoke, pale winter sunlight was filtering through the cracks in the cabin's shutters. She was still wrapped in blankets before the hearth, but Samuel was no longer beside her. For a moment she felt disoriented, memories of the previous day's ordeal flooding back. The sound of the door opening brought her fully alert. Samuel entered, carrying an armful of firewood, his breath visible in the cold air that rushed in with him. He smiled when he saw she was awake. "The storm's passed," he announced, kicking the door closed behind him and depositing the wood beside the hearth. "Clear skies, though there's nearly 3 feet of snow on the ground. How are you feeling?" Lily took stock of her condition. The bone-deep chill had receded, though her muscles ached from yesterday's exertion and exposure. "Much better, thank you," Samuel nodded, clearly pleased. "Hungry? I've already fed and checked on the horses. Your mare is recovering well." "Starving, actually," Lily admitted with a small laugh. While Samuel prepared a breakfast of cornmeal mush sweetened with honey and strong coffee, Lily excused herself to change back into her own clothes, which he had thoughtfully hung near the fire to dry overnight. In the small privacy of his bedroom, she quickly dressed, feeling somewhat more herself in her own attire despite its rumpled state. When she emerged, Samuel had breakfast waiting on the small table. As they ate, he outlined his plan for the day. "The snow's too deep for your mare to manage, yet she needs more rest after yesterday. I'll saddle my stallion and take you to your property after breakfast so you can see it. Then you can decide if you want to stay there or come back here until conditions improve." "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose further," Lily said. Samuel shook his head. "It's no imposition. Your place has been sitting empty for months. It will be cold, and I doubt there are any provisions. Thomas wasn't one for keeping a stocked pantry." The practical concerns gave Lily pause. She hadn't considered the state in which she might find her inheritance after months of abandonment. Perhaps it would be wise to see the property first, she conceded. After breakfast, Samuel helped Lily into her coat before donning his own heavy sheepskin jacket. Outside, the world had been transformed into a dazzling white landscape under a crystal-clear blue sky. The snow stretched unbroken in all directions, with only a few dark shapes of distant hills and trees breaking the white expanse. Samuel's ranch was more substantial than Lily had realized in the blinding conditions of the previous evening. Besides the main cabin, there was a large barn, a corral now buried in snow, and what appeared to be a bunkhouse, though Samuel explained he currently had no hired hands during the winter months. "Come spring, I'll take on 2 or 3 men to help with the foaling season and summer work," he said as he saddled his stallion, a magnificent animal named Thunder. "For now, I manage alone." The ride to Lily's property took longer than the 2 miles might suggest due to the deep snow. Samuel insisted she sit in front, with him behind to better support her if needed. The proximity was intimate, his arms around her as he held the reins, but after the night they'd spent beside the fire, it seemed a minor concern. They crossed a frozen stream that Samuel identified as the boundary between their properties. Beyond it, the land rose slightly, and Lily could see an orchard of bare fruit trees standing like sentinels in the snow. Further on, a small cabin came into view, smoke-stained stone chimney rising from a snow-covered roof. "There it is," Samuel said, his voice close to her ear. "Thomas Parker's place, your place now." As they approached, Lily felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. This remote cabin was now her home, her future. They dismounted, Samuel helping her down before securing Thunder to a hitching post half buried in snow. Together, they trudged through the deep drifts to the cabin door. The door was stuck, frozen shut by the snow and cold. Samuel put his shoulder to it, pushing until it gave way with a groan of protest. Inside, the cabin was dark and frigid, with the musty smell of a long abandoned dwelling. When Samuel pushed open the shutters to admit light, Lily could see that the interior consisted of 2 rooms, a main living area with a stone fireplace and kitchen space, and a smaller bedroom visible through an open doorway. The furniture was simple and sparse: a table and 2 chairs, a cupboard, a rocking chair near the fireplace, and a bed visible in the bedroom. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, and a mouse scurried away as they entered, disappearing into a hole in the floorboards. "It needs work," Samuel said, stating the obvious, "but the structure is sound. Thomas built this place to last." Lily moved about the small space, trying to envision it as a home. Despite the dust and cold, she could see the potential. The windows faced east and south, which would provide good light. The stone fireplace was well built and would provide adequate heat. The roof, from what she could tell, didn't leak. "What do you think?" Samuel asked after allowing her time to explore. "I think," Lily said slowly, "that I have my work cut out for me." Then she smiled, a genuine expression of determination. "But I'm not afraid of work. This is mine, the first thing I've ever truly owned. I can make it a home." Samuel nodded approvingly. "That's the spirit. But it will take time, and right now it's not habitable. No fire would cut, no provisions, and in this cold it would take days to properly warm the place through." "What do you suggest?" Lily asked, though she suspected she knew his answer. "Stay at my place until we can get this one ready. I can help you clean and repair what needs fixing. We can bring over provisions from town once the roads are passable again." The offer was generous, perhaps too generous from a man she barely knew. Yet Lily had already trusted Samuel with her life during the blizzard, and her instincts told her he was honorable. Still, caution made her hesitate. "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to be a burden. Perhaps there's somewhere in Casa Grande where I could stay." Samuel shook his head. "The town's small, just a trading post, saloon, and a few houses. No proper boarding house yet. The nearest hotel would be in Tucson, and that's nearly 50 miles in good weather." Lily sighed, recognizing the practical reality of her situation. "Then I accept your offer with gratitude. But I insist on contributing cooking, cleaning, whatever I can do to earn my keep until my place is habitable." "Deal," Samuel said with a smile, extending his hand. They shook on it, and Lily couldn't help but notice how her smaller hand disappeared in his larger one, rough with calluses from ranch work yet surprisingly gentle in its grip. Over the next 2 weeks, a routine developed. Each morning after breakfast, Samuel would bring Lily to her cabin where they would work on making it habitable. He showed her how to properly seal the windows against drafts, repaired loose floorboards, and taught her how to maintain the fireplace for maximum heat efficiency. As the snow began to melt, Samuel traveled to Casa Grande to purchase supplies, returning with bags of flour, sugar, coffee, dried beans, and other staples to stock Lily's pantry. He also surprised her with fabric for curtains and a new straw tick for the bed, explaining that the old one was likely home to mice after sitting unused for so long. In the evenings, they would return to Samuel's cabin where Lily insisted on cooking dinner as her contribution. She discovered that, while her Eastern cooking skills needed adaptation for frontier ingredients, Samuel was appreciatively uncritical of her efforts. After dinner, they would sit before the fire, sometimes reading aloud from Samuel's small collection of books, sometimes simply talking until it was time to retire, Lily taking Samuel's bed while he slept on a pallet before the fire, an arrangement he had insisted upon despite her protests. Through these quiet evenings, Lily learned about Samuel's life as a rancher, his dreams of expanding his horse breeding operation, and his deep connection to the land. In turn, she shared stories of her life in Philadelphia, her passion for drawing, which she had pursued in secret since her aunt considered it an unsuitable pastime for a proper lady, and her hopes for building a new life in the West. "I'd like to see your drawings sometime," Samuel said one evening, surprising Lily, who had never had anyone express interest in her art before. "I'd like that," she replied softly. "Though I left most of them behind, I only brought a small sketchbook and some pencils." "Perhaps you could draw the ranch," he suggested, "or the mountains to the north when the snow clears. The light here is different from back east, clearer, sharper somehow." The suggestion delighted Lily, and the following day Samuel presented her with a new sketchbook he'd apparently asked the storekeeper in Casa Grande to order weeks ago for his sister's birthday. "Catherine won't mind if you have it instead," he assured her when Lily protested. "She has little interest in drawing anyway." As January progressed, the weather improved enough for Lily to meet some of the scattered neighbors. Samuel took her to the small trading post in Casa Grande, introducing her to the store owner, a gruff but friendly man named Howard Jenkins, and his wife Martha, who immediately invited Lily to join the small group of women who gathered for quilting and socializing once a month. "Not many ladies out this way," Martha explained. "We have to stick together." The Jenkinses' welcome was echoed by the few other settlers Lily met, though she noticed some curious glances exchanged when Samuel introduced her as Miss Parker, Thomas's niece from Philadelphia, staying at my place while her cabin is being prepared. The raised eyebrows and knowing looks made Lily uncomfortably aware of how their arrangement might appear to others, despite its innocent nature. One afternoon, as they were returning from Casa Grande with additional supplies for Lily's cabin, Samuel seemed unusually quiet. Finally, as they approached his ranch, he cleared his throat. "I hope you weren't too bothered by Mrs. Simmons' comments today," he said, referring to the postmaster's wife who had made a rather pointed inquiry about when Lily would be moving into her own place. "It's to be expected, I suppose," Lily replied, trying to sound unconcerned though the woman's insinuations had stung. "In their eyes, our living arrangement is unconventional." Samuel nodded, his expression troubled. "People talk, especially in small communities." "I don't want your reputation to suffer." "My reputation is my concern, not yours," Lily said more sharply than she'd intended. Then, softening her tone, she added, "Besides, my cabin is nearly ready. I should be able to move in within a few days." "Of course," Samuel agreed quickly, though Lily thought she detected a note of regret in his voice. Or perhaps that was merely her own feelings coloring her perception, for she had discovered, somewhat to her surprise, that she was in no hurry to leave the comfort and companionship of Samuel's home. The realization troubled her. In the short time they had known each other, Samuel Fletcher had become important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated. His quiet strength, unwavering kindness, and unexpected depth had steadily worn away her initial caution. She found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, admiring the grace with which he moved despite his size, the thoughtfulness evident in his blue eyes, the rare but transformative smile that occasionally broke through his serious demeanor. Such thoughts were dangerous. Lily had come west for independence, not to develop feelings for the first man who showed her kindness. Yet as they reached the ranch and Samuel helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist slightly longer than necessary, she wondered if perhaps her feelings weren't entirely one-sided. The next morning brought unseasonably warm weather, with the last of the snow rapidly melting under a bright February sun. Samuel suggested they ride out to check on some of his horses that had wintered in a sheltered valley on the far side of his property. "It would be good for you to see more of the area," he said over breakfast. "And Belle could use the exercise after being cooped up so long." Lily readily agreed, eager to explore beyond the immediate vicinity of the ranch and her own small property. They set out after breakfast, riding side by side across land that was transforming daily as the snow retreated, revealing the dormant grasses beneath. Samuel proved to be an excellent guide, pointing out landmarks and sharing the history of the area from ancient Native American trails to more recent settler developments. They stopped to rest the horses near a rocky outcropping, and Samuel showed Lily how to identify potential water sources by the type of vegetation, a valuable skill in the arid territory. "The land speaks if you know how to listen," he explained, indicating how certain plants grew only where underground water was relatively close to the surface. "My father taught me to read these signs. It could save your life someday." They continued their ride, eventually cresting a small rise that revealed a stunning view of mountains in the distance, their peaks still snow-covered and gleaming in the sun. "It's beautiful," Lily breathed, taking in the vast landscape, so different from the east. "Different beautiful," Samuel agreed. "When I first came here as a boy, I hated it, thought it was barren and lifeless compared to Missouri. Took me years to see the beauty in it, the subtle colors, the way the light changes everything, the resilience of every living thing that survives here." Lily glanced at him, struck by the poetry in his words and the genuine love for the land evident in his expression. "Now you couldn't imagine living anywhere else." "No," he said simply, "this is home." They found Samuel's horses in good condition, grazing contentedly in the protected valley where grass had already begun to emerge from the melting snow. Lily was impressed by the animals, a small herd of about 20, with several obviously pregnant mares. "They're magnificent," she said, admiring the glossy coats and strong lines of the horses. "You breed them," Samuel nodded, pride evident in his face. "Crossing sturdy Mustang stock with Eastern thoroughbreds creates horses with endurance and speed well adapted to this territory." He patted Thunder's neck affectionately. "This fellow's sire was my first successful breeding experiment." As they headed back toward the ranch, taking a different route that Samuel promised would reveal more spectacular views, Lily found herself contemplating her future. Her cabin was nearly ready, which meant she would soon be living alone on her small property. The prospect, which had once represented the independence she craved, now seemed somewhat daunting. "What are your plans for your uncle's land?" Samuel asked, seemingly reading her thoughts. "I'm not entirely sure," Lily admitted. "I know nothing about ranching. The orchard seems manageable and perhaps a vegetable garden for my own use. Beyond that," she shrugged. "The land could support a few cattle," Samuel suggested, "or sheep, though they require different care. Or you could expand the orchard. Fruit trees do well in that soil with proper irrigation." "All options that require knowledge I don't possess," Lily pointed out with a rueful smile. Samuel was quiet for a moment before saying carefully, "I could help you, show you what you need to know." The offer touched Lily deeply. "You've already done so much for me." "Neighbors help each other out here," he replied, though something in his tone suggested this was more than a neighborly offer. They rode in companionable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon when they reached a high point on a ridge that offered a panoramic view of the surrounding countryside. In the distance, Lily could see Samuel's ranch, and beyond it, the smaller shape of her own cabin. "From up here, you can see how the two properties naturally complement each other," Samuel observed. "Your land has better soil for growing, while mine has superior grazing." Lily nodded, seeing the truth in his assessment. "It must have made for good neighborly relations between you and my uncle." "It did," Samuel agreed. "We often discussed how well the two ranches could work together if they were ever joined." The careful way he said this made Lily glance sharply at him, but Samuel was looking straight ahead, his expression unreadable. Before she could formulate a response, a sudden flash of movement in a grove of trees below caught her attention. "What's that?" she asked, pointing. Samuel followed her gaze, his body tensing immediately. Wild pigs, javelinas, we should give them a wide berth. They can be dangerous, especially if there are young ones in the group. He began to guide Thunder away from the ridge, gesturing for Lily to follow when a shot rang out, echoing across the valley. The javelinas scattered in panic and Belle reared in fright, nearly unseating Lily, who was unprepared for the sudden movement. "Hunters," Samuel said grimly, quickly dismounting to calm Lily's frightened mare. "Likely didn't see us up here." Another shot rang out, closer this time, and Belle reared again. This time, Lily couldn't maintain her seat. She felt herself falling, heard Samuel shout her name, and then pain exploded through her body as she struck the rocky ground. For a moment, everything went dark. When Lily's vision cleared, Samuel was kneeling beside her, his face tight with concern. "Don't move," he instructed, his hands gently probing her limbs. "Where does it hurt?" "Everywhere," Lily gasped, then more specifically, "my ankle and my side." Samuel carefully examined her left ankle, which had already begun to swell. His touch was gentle but thorough as he checked for broken bones. "I don't think it's broken, but definitely sprained. Your ribs might be bruised from the impact." He looked up at the darkening sky, his expression troubled. "We need to get back, and you can't ride like this. I'll have to carry you." Before Lily could protest, Samuel had lifted her into his arms with surprising ease. The movement sent a jolt of pain through her injured side, and she couldn't suppress a gasp. "I'm sorry," he said immediately, adjusting his hold to better support her. "It's going to be a rough journey back." With impressive strength, Samuel managed to get Lily onto Thunder's back before mounting behind her. He arranged her sideways across the saddle, supporting her weight against his chest while gathering Belle's reins with his free hand. "Hold on to me," he instructed, and Lily gratefully wrapped her arms around his solid torso, finding security in his unwavering strength. The ride back was painful despite Samuel's efforts to choose the smoothest path. By the time they reached the ranch, darkness had fallen, and Lily was pale with pain and exhaustion. Samuel lifted her from the saddle and carried her directly into the cabin, placing her gently on his bed. "I need to see to the horses," he said. "Then I'll tend to your injuries. Will you be all right for a few minutes?" Lily nodded, too exhausted to speak. The pain in her ankle had intensified during the ride, and every breath sent sharp twinges through her ribs. She closed her eyes, trying to focus on anything but the discomfort. True to his word, Samuel returned quickly. He had water heating on the stove and brought a basin and clean cloths to the bedside. With careful movements, he removed Lily's boot and examined her swollen ankle. "Definitely a bad sprain," he confirmed, "and I need to check your ribs, but—" He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the impropriety of what needed to be done. "It's all right," Lily said, understanding his concern. "You've already saved my life once. I trust you." With evident reluctance, Samuel helped Lily remove her jacket and loosen the top buttons of her blouse just enough to examine the bruising along her side. His touch was clinical and respectful as he gently probed the area, but Lily was acutely aware of the intimacy of the moment. "Bruised, not broken," he concluded with relief, quickly helping her rearrange her clothing. "You're lucky. A fall like that could have been much worse." He proceeded to wrap her ankle tightly with strips of clean cloth, explaining that compression would help reduce the swelling. Then he brought her a cup of tea into which he mixed a spoonful of amber liquid, willow bark, and a little whiskey, he explained. "For the pain." Lily accepted the remedy gratefully, grimacing at the bitter taste but drinking it down. As she handed the empty cup back to Samuel, their fingers brushed, and something in his expression made her heart beat faster despite her discomfort. "You could have been killed today," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion, "when I saw you fall." "But I wasn't," Lily interrupted gently. "Thanks to you." Samuel shook his head. "I should have been more careful, known there might be hunters in that area this time of year." "You can't protect me from everything," Lily said, surprising herself with the boldness of her words, "nor should you try." He looked at her for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then he stood abruptly. "You should rest. Take my bed tonight. I'll sleep by the fire as usual." Before Lily could respond, he had left the room, closing the door softly behind him. Left alone, she sighed, wondering at the complicated emotions that had sprung up between them, emotions neither seemed ready to acknowledge openly. The next few days passed in a strange limbo as Lily recovered from her injuries. Samuel insisted she remain in bed the first day, bringing her meals and checking her ankle regularly. By the second day, she was able to move around with his help, though walking remained painful. By the third day, she was hobbling around the cabin independently, using a walking stick Samuel had carved for her throughout her convalescence. Samuel was attentive yet somehow distant, as if the accident had raised a barrier between them. He spent long hours outside working with his horses, returning to the cabin only for meals and to check on her progress. The easy companionship they had developed seemed strained, replaced by a tension Lily couldn't quite define. On the fourth evening after her fall, Lily was sitting in the rocking chair near the fire, sketching in the book Samuel had given her. She had been drawing the view from his window, the distant mountains, and the wide sky that had become so dear to her in her short time in Arizona. When the door opened, admitting Samuel from his evening chores, she closed the sketchbook reflexively, suddenly shy about sharing her work. Samuel noticed the movement and paused in the act of removing his coat. "Were you drawing?" Lily nodded, setting the sketchbook aside. "Just passing the time." "May I see?" he asked, hanging his coat on a peg by the door. When she hesitated, he added, "Unless it's private, of course." "No, it's not that," Lily said quickly. "I'm just not accustomed to showing my work to others. My aunt always considered drawing a frivolous pastime." "Your aunt sounds like a woman of limited vision," Samuel remarked dryly, warming his hands by the fire. The comment startled a laugh from Lily. "That's one way to describe her." After a moment's hesitation, she handed him the sketchbook. Samuel took it carefully, as if aware he was being entrusted with something precious. He sat in the chair opposite hers and slowly turned the pages, studying each drawing with genuine interest. Lily had filled nearly a third of the book already, with sketches of the cabin interior, the mountains, the horses, and even a quick study of Samuel himself, captured unawares as he worked at the corral. When he came to this last drawing, he paused, studying it for a long moment. "Is this how you see me?" he asked quietly. Lily felt herself blushing. "I'm sorry if I took liberties. You have an interesting face to draw." "Interesting," he repeated with a slight smile. "That's a diplomatic way of saying weathered and rough." "No," Lily said earnestly. "I meant interesting in the best sense. Your face shows character, experience. It tells a story." Samuel closed the sketchbook gently and handed it back to her. "You have a gift, Lily. These drawings capture more than just what things look like, they capture how they feel." The compliment, delivered with such simple sincerity, touched Lily deeply. "Thank you. That means a great deal coming from you." Their eyes met across the small space between them, and Lily felt the tension that had been building since her accident shift into something else, something warm and expectant. Samuel seemed about to speak when a knock at the door broke the moment. Both startled at the unexpected interruption, visitors were rare, especially after dark. Samuel rose to answer the door, his hand instinctively checking that his pistol was in place at his hip before opening it. On the porch stood a middle-aged couple Lily recognized as the Millers, whose small farm lay about 5 miles to the south. They had met briefly at the trading post during one of her trips to Casa Grande with Samuel. "Evening, Fletcher," Mr. Miller said, nodding respectfully. "Sorry to trouble you after dark, but we were passing and saw your light. Mrs. Miller was concerned about Miss Parker after hearing about her fall." "That's very kind," Samuel replied, stepping back to admit them. "Please come in out of the cold, Mrs. Miller bustled in, her eyes immediately finding Lily by the fire. "My dear, we were so worried when Martha Jenkins told us what happened. Are you recovering well?" "Much better, thank you," Lily assured her, acutely aware of how the scene must appear to the visitors, she and Samuel alone in his cabin, the domestic arrangement obvious from the sketchbook in her lap and her comfortable presence in his home. Mrs. Miller's gaze took in these details with practiced swiftness, though her expression remained polite. "We brought you some of my elderberry preserves," she said, handing a small jar to Samuel. good for the constitution when recovering from an injury. The Millers stayed for only a short time, accepting coffee but declining Samuel's offer of food. Throughout their visit, Lily noticed the subtle glances between husband and wife and the carefully worded questions that seemed designed to establish the exact nature of her relationship with Samuel. Despite their cordial manner, she could sense their assessment and likely judgment of the situation. After they had gone, Samuel stood with his back to Lily, staring out the window into the darkness. "They mean well," he said finally. "I know," Lily replied, "but they'll talk." "Yes." He turned to face her, his expression troubled. "Your cabin is ready. As soon as your ankle is strong enough, you should move in." The words shouldn't have hurt, they were merely stating the practical reality of their situation. Yet Lily felt them like a physical blow. "Are you eager to be rid of me?" She asked, trying to keep her tone light but failing. Samuel's expression softened immediately. "You know that's not true. These past weeks have been—" He trailed off, searching for words. "Yes," Lily agreed softly, "they have." He crossed the room to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his larger ones. "Lily, I need to say something, and I'm not good with words like this." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "When I found you in that snowstorm, I thought I was just helping a stranger in need. I had no idea you would become so important to me so quickly." Lily's heart quickened at his words, but she remained silent, sensing he needed to continue without interruption. "I know you came west for independence, not to tie yourself to someone immediately, and I respect that. But I also want you to know that I—" He hesitated, then pressed on. "I care for you more than I thought possible in such a short time." The simple declaration, delivered with such earnest sincerity, melted something inside Lily that she hadn't even realized was frozen. "I care for you too, Samuel," she whispered. "More than I should, perhaps." He shook his head. "There's no should about feelings like these, they simply are." His hand rose to gently touch her cheek, the calloused fingers surprisingly soft against her skin. "I'm not asking for anything right now. Just for you to know where I stand." Lily leaned slightly into his touch, her eyes holding his. "And where is that exactly?" "Hoping," he said simply. "Hoping that once you're settled in your own place, once you've had time to find your footing here and decide what you want your life to be, you might consider." He paused, then finished, "Consider including me in it." The honest vulnerability in his expression moved Lily deeply. This strong, capable man who had saved her life and shown her nothing but respect was laying his heart bare before her, asking for nothing but the chance to be considered. "Samuel," she said softly, "you are already part of my life. That's not going to change just because I move to my own cabin." Relief and something like joy flooded his features. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward. When their lips met, the kiss was gentle, questioning, a beginning rather than a demand. Lily responded in kind, her hand rising to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. When they finally parted, Samuel rested his forehead against hers for a moment. "I should still help you move to your cabin," he said, a smile in his voice. "Yes," Lily agreed. "But not because of what others might think, because it's the right next step for both of us." The following week brought warmer weather and the first hints of spring to the Arizona landscape. Lily's ankle had healed enough for her to walk without the stick, though she still favored it slightly. True to his word, Samuel helped her move into her uncle's cabin, which no longer felt like a stranger's home but her own. They had spent days preparing it, cleaning, repairing, stocking the pantry, arranging the few personal items Lily had brought from Philadelphia, along with some simple furnishings Samuel had helped her acquire from Casa Grande. The result was a humble but comfortable home that reflected Lily's growing connection to her new life in the West. On the day she officially moved in, Samuel lingered after bringing over the last of her belongings, clearly reluctant to leave. They stood together on the small porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. "It will be strange not having you at the ranch," Samuel admitted. "I've grown accustomed to your company." "You're only 2 miles away," Lily reminded him with a smile. "Hardly a great distance, true. He took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "Still, I hope you'll permit me to call on you regularly." "I would be disappointed if you didn't," she replied honestly. They had agreed to proceed slowly, allowing Lily time to establish her independence while exploring the deepening feelings between them. Samuel would come for dinner 3 times a week, and Lily would ride to his ranch on Sundays after the small church service in Casa Grande that they had begun attending together. This arrangement raised fewer eyebrows in the community than their previous living situation, though Lily was aware that their courtship for that was clearly what it had become remained a subject of interest among their neighbors. Martha Jenkins had hinted that several local widowers had expressed disappointment upon learning that the new lady from Philadelphia was already being courted by Samuel Fletcher. Spring advanced rapidly, transforming the landscape as wildflowers bloomed across the plains and Lily's orchard burst into fragrant blossoms. Samuel helped her plant a vegetable garden beside the cabin, teaching her which crops thrived in the arid soil and how to irrigate them properly using water from the creek that ran along the eastern edge of her property. In turn, Lily brought a woman's touch to Samuel's ranch when she visited, noticing needs he had overlooked during his years of bachelor living. She sewed new curtains for his windows, organized his collection of books, and added small decorative touches that transformed the functional cabin into a more welcoming home. Their courtship progressed with the steady, unhurried pace of the seasons. Samuel was respectful of Lily's need for independence, never presuming or pressuring, yet he made his feelings increasingly clear through both words and actions. He brought her wildflowers gathered during his rides, carved a beautiful box for her drawing supplies, and once, memorably, rode all the way to Tucson to find a specific book of poetry she had mentioned missing from her Philadelphia collection. For her part, Lily found herself falling deeper in love with both the man and the land he had taught her to appreciate. She discovered an unexpected talent for ranch life, taking pride in her growing garden, learning to preserve foods for the coming winter, and even assisting Samuel during foaling season when one of his prized mares needed extra attention during a difficult birth. The successful delivery of a healthy colt after a tense night spent in the barn together seemed to mark a turning point in their relationship. As dawn broke and they stood watching the wobbly-legged newborn take its first tentative steps, Samuel turned to Lily, his face showing both exhaustion and exhilaration. "You were amazing," he said, brushing a strand of hay from her disheveled hair. "Most city women would have fainted at the sight of childbirth, let alone rolled up their sleeves and helped," Lily laughed, leaning against him tiredly. "I'm not most city women anymore. I'm becoming a woman of the West." "Yes," Samuel agreed, his arms sliding around her waist. "You are." The simple statement held so much approval and admiration that Lily felt her heart swell with emotion. Standing there in the golden light of dawn, surrounded by the honest smells of the barn and the miracle of new life, she knew with absolute certainty that she had found her place both in this land and with this man. That evening, after they had both rested and cleaned up from their night in the barn, Samuel rode Lily back to her cabin. At the door, instead of the gentle goodnight kiss that had become their custom, he took both her hands in his. "Lily Parker," he said, his voice steady despite the nervousness evident in his eyes, "I love you. I think I began falling in love with you that night in the snowstorm, and every day since has only deepened those feelings." Lily's breath caught at the declaration, though it was not entirely unexpected. Still, hearing the words spoken aloud made her heart race. "I love you too, Samuel," she replied softly, "more than I ever thought possible." His smile at her words was radiant, transforming his usually serious face. "Then I have a question to ask you, one I've been wanting to ask for weeks now." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box, carved with intricate patterns of leaves and flowers. Kneeling before her on the porch steps, he opened it to reveal a simple gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond that caught the last rays of the setting sun. "This was my mother's," he explained. My father gave it to me before he died, saying it should go to the woman I chose to share my life with. He took a deep breath. Lily Parker, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Time seemed to stand still as Lily looked down at the earnest face of the man who had saved her life in more ways than one first from the deadly snowstorm. And then by showing her a kind of love she had never known was possible. The independence she had sought by coming west had not been compromised by loving him. Rather, it had been enhanced by finding a partner who respected her strength and valued her contributions. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, Samuel Fletcher, I will marry you." His face lit with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit as if it had been made for her, the gold band gleaming against her skin. Samuel rose to his feet and gathered her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the emotion words could not express. When they finally parted, both breathless, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I was thinking," he said, "that maybe we could join our properties officially. Your uncle and I used to talk about how well they complement each other." Lily smiled, remembering his earlier comment about the natural fit between their lands. "A merger of assets, very practical, Mr. Fletcher." "I'm a practical man," he agreed with a matching smile, "but in this case the practical aligns perfectly with my heart's desire." As they stood together on the porch of what would soon be their shared home, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky, Lily marveled at the journey that had brought her here. From a frightened, freezing woman lost in a snowstorm to a confident, loved ranch wife to be it was a transformation she could never have imagined when she left Philadelphia. The wedding took place in June, when the desert was ablaze with wildflowers and the weather perfect for an outdoor celebration. The entire community of Casa Grande turned out for the occasion, the ceremony held beneath the flowering trees of Lily's orchard. Martha Jenkins organized a group of local women to prepare a feast, while Howard Jenkins insisted on providing barrels of his best apple cider for the celebration. Lily wore a simple white dress ordered from Tucson, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a formal veil. Samuel, looking somewhat uncomfortable but undeniably handsome in a new suit, couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked toward him on the arm of Mr. Miller, who had offered to give her away in the absence of any family. The circuit preacher, who happened to be passing through the area, performed the ceremony with obvious pleasure at participating in such a joyful occasion. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel's kiss was both tender and possessive, bringing cheers and good-natured whistles from the assembled guests. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with music provided by local ranchers who brought fiddles and guitars for dancing under the stars. As night fell, lanterns were lit in the trees, creating a magical glow over the festivities. When the last guests had departed, and Samuel carried Lily across the threshold of what was now their shared home, both were tired but blissfully happy. The cabin had been transformed for the occasion, with fresh flowers in every room and a special quilt made by the local women adorning the bed in the bedroom that now truly belonged to both of them. "Welcome home, Mrs. Fletcher," Samuel said, setting her gently on her feet and kissing her forehead. "It's been home for months," Lily replied, smiling up at him, "but now it's complete." In the years that followed, the Fletcher Ranch prospered under their joint stewardship. Samuel's horse breeding operation expanded, gaining recognition throughout the territory for producing animals of exceptional quality and endurance. Lily's orchard flourished, yielding abundant harvests that she preserved and sold, developing a reputation for the finest apple butter and peach preserves in southern Arizona. Their first child, a son they named Thomas after Lily's uncle, arrived a year after their wedding, a sturdy boy with Samuel's blue eyes and Lily's determined spirit. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Catherine, named for Samuel's sister, who had traveled from Tucson with her husband to be present for the birth. The small 2-room cabin was expanded over time to accommodate their growing family, with Samuel adding a larger kitchen, 2 additional bedrooms, and eventually a proper studio where Lily could pursue her artwork. Her drawings of frontier life, capturing both the harshness and the beauty of the Arizona territory, eventually caught the attention of a publisher in San Francisco who commissioned her to illustrate a book about the American West. Through all the changes and growth, Samuel and Lily remained deeply in love, their bond strengthened by shared challenges and triumphs. They never forgot the snowstorm that had brought them together indeed. It became a story they told their children on cold winter nights, a reminder of how close they had come to never finding each other at all. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Samuel surprised Lily with a special gift, a locket containing a tiny drawing she had made of the two of them during their courtship, and a small pressed flower from the bouquet she had carried at their wedding. "To remember how it all began," he said as he fastened it around her neck, "with a snowstorm, a fire, and two strangers who became everything to each other." "The best kind of beginning," Lily agreed, her hand covering his as it rested against the locket, "because it led us here." That night, as they sat on the porch of their expanded home, watching their children play in the yard as the sun set over the mountains that had become as familiar to Lily as the streets of Philadelphia once were, she reflected on the journey that had brought her west. The independence she had sought had been found, not in isolation, but in a partnership based on mutual respect and deep love. The bitter cold that had nearly claimed her life had instead led her to the warmth of a love that would sustain her for all her days. Samuel squeezed her hand gently, as if sensing her thoughts. "Happy?" he asked, the question simple but profound. "Beyond anything I could have imagined," Lily replied truthfully, leaning against the strong shoulder that had once held her close to save her from freezing, and had never stopped being her shelter since. As the stars emerged in the clear desert sky, they sat together in contented silence, secure in the knowledge that what had begun in desperate survival had blossomed into a life rich with purpose, love, and the quiet joy of having found, against all odds, exactly where they were meant to be.